Next, we're going to have a former employee of the commission, and the main reason why we're all here. And we'd like to thank her, Kathleen Carroll.
I'm Kathleen Carroll. I served as an attorney for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing from 2006 until I was terminated about 6 months ago in retaliation for bringing forth wrongdoing to the executive director, to Chair Sun, and eventually to Senator Steinberg's office and the auditor. And I'm just going to talk about a few things today. You've heard a lot of information, and I'm sure you're going to have some questions for me. Vice Chair Dutton actually hit the nail on the head. Are we looking at a bureaucratic empire here? And so the first thing I want to talk about is what I view as the real center of the problem and why you're seeing what you're seeing in the audit report. And I believe that CTC management essentially was creating a private bureaucratic empire using public funds. And they were more concerned about increasing numbers, and when they show numbers they can get more funding, and then that equates to hiring more staff and just increasing the size of the agency, and that usually equates to, in this case unfortunately, more friends and family member on the payroll. But the real center of the problem is that there was just a massive amount of documentations coming in. You've heard today that they come in from different sources. They certainly don't just come in from the Department of Justice. We also get reports, as you heard today, from school districts. But the big numbers, the massive amount of documents were coming in from the Department of Justice, and I believe they all were not legally related to fitness to teach. And in that massive amount, and we're talking piles and piles and piles of paper, within those documents were the cases related to fitness to teach, the serious stuff that you see in the audit report. They were just slipping through the cracks, and that's just not fair to anyone. It's certainly not fair to public safety, student safety. It's not fair to school districts if they send in a report as mandated by law, but it takes 3 years for us to actually follow up with them. They could be held liable and get sued, should something happen at another district. The other district's going to blame that original district. And it's not also fair to teachers. I have seen applications being held up for years on minor offenses that may not be related to teaching. And if they have to wait a lengthy amount of time, well, those jobs are going to go to someone else. So it's just not fair to a number of facets of people in the public. I'd like to refer to page 75 of the audit report in terms of magnitude. It looks like it's a far cry from the asserted 12,600. And I believe, again, they really just care more about numbers than they do about public safety, about what their responsibility is to the public. And I heard someone ask today about the agency, and I don't hear that question was asked, why only a fifth of the employees working. We do have different divisions. I don't think the commission has answered what those divisions are. But there is a division that just looks at academic eligibility, the certification and waiver division. So there is a number of people there that are looking at all the different types of credentials that people are applying for and whether or not they're academically eligible. So there's that amount of staff. There's computer staff. There's also a staff that is the professional service division. They're involved in improving the teacher preparation programs and setting the standards for those programs. So this agency actually has a lot of power over the educational community. It's not just disciplining teaching credentials, and that seemed to be a misperception here. And I think the commission would agree with that statement. What I'd like to say in terms of the auditor is they really had an uphill battle when you have such a significant percentage of employees fearing retaliation. And they all know that I was taken out because I spoke up And you couple that with a number of employees in positions of power who are friends with one another, and then another bunch of employees who are related to one another, you're basically just creating this circle of fear. And the auditor's office probably had a real uphill battle, and they should really be commended for all their work. I mean, I was literally on pins and needles before their audit report was released, and I was really pleased to see what an extensive job they did. They did an amazing job given the circumstances. In an environment like this, people are going to just want to clamp down, and they're not going to want to be forthcoming because they're going to be afraid to speak up, otherwise they'll lose their job. So I did want to talk about that. The nepotism and cronyism doesn't just affect employees, it also affects the public's confidence to have the confidence that the money's going to be spent wisely and that decisions and policies are going to be made without bias. And so I did want to talk about that. And there's also the issue of oversight. As this agency goes forward, when you have a bunch of people fearing retaliation, if they see government fraud or waste or someone violating the law, you think they're going to speak up? They're not going to speak up. They're going to keep their headphones on, their heads down, and their mouths shut. And I use that characterization because literally that's what I saw. I saw people whispering in the hallways. If they're too afraid to speak up against management, they'd go out to the parking lot. If they're seeing management walking out to the parking lot, they'd go to walk away from the building. People were really scared to speak up, even to ask questions. I saw employees ostracized if they asked too many questions. I saw them illegally harassed. And it was very sad, and I think Assemblymember Huber asked about the independent investigation. I mean, it was not independent at all, and I remember the hearing. I mean, I wasn't physically here, but I did view a video of it, and Director Jansen said that there was going to be this independent investigation of the management practices. Well, that's not what happened at all. This independent investigator interviewed employees and asked personal questions about me, and it was disgusting. And I will say the employees that were interviewed, they were very forthcoming, given how fearful they probably were. And if they're watching, I just want to say that I'm proud of them for coming forward, because I know it was hard. I also, another thing that I want to talk about is, it's a little bit personal, but it absolutely goes to the character of these people, and it has absolutely hurt me very much. And one of the things this independent investigator did was mischaracterize my allegations, and it was almost as if she wanted to divide me against the employees. But there's one thing that happened, and when I talk about this, I'm not trying to look for any kind of sympathy. And this was not raised by me in my interview with Miss Eisen. This was raised by Ani Kendall and Mary Armstrong. I'm a heart transplant recipient, and I'm not saying that for sympathy. They raised it, I didn't. And during their interviews, under penalty of perjury, they had the gall to say that I said to another employee that I didn't have a heart transplant, which is not true. And I have since had to contact my doctor and ask him to be a witness during my hearing, which is disgusting. It's the most despicable thing these people have done, and there's been a number of lies to hear, but that was the most hurtful and disgusting. To go through a transplant, and I don't know if any of you know anyone that's been through it, or if you've been through it yourself, but you go through a lengthy rehabilitation process. I'm going to be on immunosuppressant medications for the rest of my life. And but you're proud that you survived it. And I've talked to other recipients. So you go through something like this, you're never going to tell another person that you didn't go through it. And not only am I proud that I survived it, but I'm also feel very lucky that I'm able to work full time, because a lot of recipients are not that lucky, and they're often very sick afterwards. And so this really goes to the core of these people. I do want to bring up the seminal case on the issue of taking a licensing sanction on teachers, because that really wasn't brought up today. And that's a California Supreme Court case, Morrison versus State Board of Education. And that goes to the fact that you don't get to just impose your moral judgments on teachers, which I saw these individuals doing. And I'm talking about the attorneys, Mary Armstrong and Lee Pope. I mean, they essentially, this kind of harkens back to the McCarthy era, where, you know, if you don't like someone, or if they don't agree with your beliefs, then, you know, you're just going to, you know, hang them out to dry. And I did see that. There was cases going to committee very arbitrarily, not consistently, and I really encourage all of you to read that case. It really did.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I covered everything, and I did want to thank everyone for letting me speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
My name is Peter Persley. I'm an attorney. I hold a PhD from Stanford University in education, administration, and policy analysis. I just want to turn your attention to some of the recommendations from the audit. I'll be very brief about this. On page 10, they list some criteria that they're recommending for improving the hiring process. I would recommend that in those bullet points there be included a statement that selection criteria, not just procedural matters, selection criteria be included in whatever personnel manual gets developed eventually. Also, I'd like to express my complete lack of confidence in this agency being able to come up with a decent personnel manual on its own. I think recommendations need to be made to bring in employment law experts from both the employment side and from the employee side. These folks do not have the ability to do it. They just can't turn this out overnight. Also, there need to be termination criteria. That's not mentioned in here. Finally, given the track record of this agency, I think that until further notice from the legislature that they can stop doing it, this agency needs to disclose familial relationships and social relationships among its applicants to all applicants who are being considered for a job.
Thank you. We would, if you have written
just one more item, and that is that I'm concerned about funding for this agency. I understand that funds from this agency flow to private entities that are for-profit. I think that needs to be looked into for personnel purposes, for teacher training, and for teacher evaluation. I don't think that public funds should be going to for-profit private schools.
Mike Kaufman. I was on the committee on teacher credentials from June 2009 until December 2010, when I was fired. Within about a 10-day period of Kathleen Carroll's termination, I was fired because I incurred the wrath of Mary Armstrong, perhaps Ting's son, by asking too many embarrassing questions. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but on 6 August 2009, there was a commission meeting where Commissioner Beverly Young asked Mary Armstrong, Mary, we just heard about the scandal at the nursing board, their backlog. Do we have a backlog? Their Counsel General, Mary Armstrong, had the audacity to say to them, everybody has a backlog. That's your normal workload. At any given time, we have little backlogs. And then she went on to say, and of course, if it's a mandatory, we can act immediately. In view of the audit report, Mary Armstrong lied to her client, the commission. Okay, in private life, I'm an attorney. I first heard that audio. It's on the internet. You don't have to take my word for it. It's item 5A on the 6 August 2009 commission here, and you can actually hear it. I first heard that in maybe November 2009, and it angered me because I had heard from staff anecdotally there was a backlog, that people were afraid there was a cover-up.
Please ask you to wrap up.
Okay. I called Beverly Young and told her, you've been misled. A couple days later, I spoke with Ting Sun. This is in January. Ting Sun, she first learned about this in January. I said, Ting Sun, you don't know me from the man in the moon. I'm willing to give you a name in absolute confidence whom you do know. She gave me her word. I gave her the name of Kathleen Carroll. 3 days later, Dale Jansen calls Kathleen Carroll into his office to explain why she is talking about the backlog to Ting Sun on the telephone. So much for confidentiality. There's more concern with CTC in protecting themselves than in bringing out the truth.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, one final thing if I may. As recently as last week, there was a commission meeting. At that meeting, Ting Sun expressed some umbrage over news reports that were linking the announced retirement of Dale Jansen to the audit report. And she said, no, the audit report came out April 7. Jansen announced his retirement publicly in March. Well, you probably know that the audit report went first to CTC, probably way before March. How else would the audit report that came out on 7 April have not only CTC's comments, but the auditor's rebuttal?
Thank you.
Carrie Clark, a former high school English teacher here in California. I was a whistleblower in a local school district. I haven't heard any discussion about the fact that the commission also credentials administrators. There is no way for those of us who understand fund accounting or school finance to let the powers that be understand. The commission was complicitous when myself and a teacher at the next school district, a school administrator went to. I was rendered severely disabled with post-traumatic stress disorder. Under stresses, I coil on the right side of my body. I thought I knew enough to put this man in jail. I didn't know that nobody would care. There was no reporting system. When I went to the commission with this other teacher, the same thing happened that I heard here, including the statutes of limitations expirations. This man went on and damaged educators up and down the state of California while he overspent, while he misspent, while monies disappeared. Nobody seemed to want to report him. They were all complicitous and laughed at education code standards. Something has to be done.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
My name is Cheryl Blychester. I've just recently completed my doctoral dissertation specifically studying California state boards and commissions and how they go dysfunctional. And so my study was a blind study. I have no idea what boards and what commissioners specifically responded to it, so I can't speak specifically to them. But as a broad statement and things for you to consider, this type of action cannot go on without some complicity of the regulated community, right? So if you're an engineer and you have an engineering license, which I do, I have 5 different credentials from 5 different credentialing agencies in the state of California. So you cannot have this amount of mismanagement of cases without there being board capture is what they refer to it as, right? So you can't have had this going on for this long without complicity of, in this case, the CTA. The next point that I'd like to make is that mine was a quantitative study, but I left opportunity for the respondents to respond anonymously, which many, many did, and I heard lots of stories like this across California. But one of the things that I heard repeated often was that staff lie to the boards and commissions repeatedly when they're making testimony, and there are no repercussions, even when the commissions catch them, even when they say, "Are you lying to us?" And they have to admit they are. So I have lots of suggestions on how to reformulate boards. That was part of my dissertation.